Nicholas Turner had come to a friend's wedding expecting the usual festivities, but one look at the bride made him notice a strange detail that kept him on his toes, and when he glanced under her dress, he found himself in complete shock. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Nicholas had long ago accepted that his life was meant to be one of discipline, dedication, and purpose. He was a renowned fertility specialist, a doctor whose expertise had brought happiness to countless couples struggling with infertility. Patients flew in from different states to seek his consultation, and his colleagues held him in high regard. If there was a challenge in the field of reproductive medicine, Nicholas was the man to solve it. But for all his success in the medical world, his personal life was an entirely different story. His life outside the hospital was sterile, not in the clinical sense, but in a way that reflected a deliberate emotional distance from people. He worked late, kept minimal social commitments, and avoided romantic entanglements altogether. There was a time when he had imagined a different life for himself, one that involved a wife, children, and a home filled with warmth, but that future had been stolen from him years ago when Sarah walked out of his life without explanation. Even now, years later, the mere thought of her name caused something deep inside him to tighten. He had spent so much time trying to rationalize her departure, to make sense of it the way he would a complex medical case, yet there was never any logical explanation. One day she was there, his partner, his love, the woman with whom he had planned to build a future, and the next, she was gone. No phone calls, no messages, just a single hastily written note telling him that she couldn't stay. At first, he searched for her with desperation, then with quiet determination. He tried to respect her wishes, but deep down he had always hoped for closure, some sort of resolution to the story they had started together. In time, he had no choice but to accept that she was truly gone. The past was the past. He had moved on, even if moving on meant throwing himself entirely into his work and ensuring that no woman would ever have the chance to leave him again. He had grown used to his solitude. It suited him. At least that was what he told himself. Then the wedding invitation arrived. Nicholas had nearly tossed it aside without a second glance. It had come in a sleek cream-colored envelope with embossed gold lettering. He had assumed it was from a former colleague or a patient who had, for some reason, decided to invite him to their celebration. It wasn't until he read the names on the card that his interest piqued: Derek Morgan and Elizabeth Hudson. Derek was his best friend. They had known each other since college, though their lives had taken very different paths. Derek had gone into corporate law while Nicholas had pursued medicine. Despite the differences in their careers, their friendship had endured. Derek had always been the more social of the two, the one who made an effort to stay connected. Nicholas hadn't even realized Derek was engaged. He hadn't mentioned a fiancé during their last conversation. But then again, it had been months since they'd spoken. A small, cynical part of Nicholas wondered if that was a sign of how distant he had become from the people in his life. He had always been focused on work, but lately he had felt even more detached. Was that why Derek hadn't bothered to tell him about his engagement? He turned the card over in his hands, debating whether to attend. Weddings weren't his thing. The idea of sitting through a long ceremony, making small talk with strangers, and pretending to celebrate love when he had long since given up on it wasn't exactly appealing. But Derek was his friend. Derek had stood by Nicholas during some of the hardest times of his life, and missing his friend's wedding without a good reason felt wrong. With a sigh, Nicholas set the invitation down on his desk and leaned back in his chair. He would go. He would endure the speeches, the awkward conversations, and the endless questioning about why he wasn't dating anyone. He would smile, offer his congratulations, and leave as soon as it was socially acceptable. It would be one night, a few hours at most. What harm could it do? The wedding day arrived sooner than he expected. Nicholas had spent the morning at the hospital finishing a consultation with a patient who had recently undergone IVF treatment. By the time he checked the clock, he realized he had just enough time to shower, change, and make it to the venue before the ceremony began. The event was being held at a grand estate on the outskirts of Chicago. Nicholas had no doubt that Derek had spared no expense. His friend had always had a taste for the extravagant. As Nicholas pulled up to the venue, a valet greeted him, took his car keys, and directed him toward the entrance. Inside, the decor was as luxurious as he had expected. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a golden glow over elegantly dressed guests. Tables were set with pristine white linens, delicate floral arrangements, and flickering candlelight. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory, filled with a low hum of conversation and laughter. Nicholas recognized a few familiar faces, old acquaintances from college, colleagues of Derek's, but he wasn't in the mood for small talk. He made his way to his assigned seat, grateful for the temporary solitude as the ceremony was about to begin. A hush fell over the room as the music started, signaling the entrance of the bridal party. Nicholas turned his attention toward the front of the hall, watching as the bridesmaids made their way down the aisle, followed by the flower girl, then the ring bearer, and finally the bride. At first, Nicholas barely paid attention. He noted the elegant white dress, the delicate lace veil draping over her shoulders, and the poised way she carried herself as she walked toward Derek. But then something caught his eye. There was something familiar about her posture, the way she moved, the tilt of her chin. His stomach tightened. It wasn't possible. The bride reached Derek's side as the officiant began speaking, welcoming everyone to the ceremony, but Nicholas could barely process the words. His gaze was fixed on the woman standing before him, on the only part of her face he could see beneath the sheer veil. His heart pounded as realization crept in. He knew her somehow, impossibly, he knew her. Nicholas sat motionless in his seat, his eyes fixed on the woman standing beside Derek at the altar. His mind rejected the possibility, yet his instinct screamed otherwise. The familiarity of her posture, the subtle tilt of her chin, the way she held her hands delicately in front of her, it was all too familiar. His rational mind told him it was a coincidence, a trick of the lighting, or his own subconscious playing cruel games, but the pounding in his chest told him otherwise. He clenched his fists against his thighs, forcing himself to breathe evenly. He hadn't seen Sarah in years. He had given up searching for her long ago, forcing himself to move forward to bury whatever remnants of hope had lingered. And yet, as he sat there watching this woman standing beside his best friend, the past came crashing back in a suffocating wave. The ceremony carried on. The officiant's words blended into a distant hum as the guests around him were enraptured by the couple's exchanged smiles and whispered words. Nicholas barely registered any of it. His eyes never left the bride. He told himself he was being paranoid, but every instinct in him rebelled against that thought. Then he saw it. As the bride turned slightly, her veil shifted over her shoulder, and the lace trim moved just enough for him to catch sight of her collarbone. His breath caught in his throat. Just above the delicate neckline of her gown was a small, unmistakable birthmark identical to the one Sarah had always had, a very distinct shape positioned just below her right collarbone, a mark he had traced with his fingers countless times, a mark impossible to forget. His stomach twisted into a painful knot, his pulse hammering in his ears, as the room around him blurred, the murmuring voices and soft background music fading into nothing but noise. It wasn't just a coincidence. The woman standing at the altar was Sarah. The realization slammed into him like a freight train. His mind raced for an explanation. She had disappeared. She had cut him out of her life completely. So how How was she standing there now, just a few feet away from him, marrying his best friend? His breathing turned shallow, his hands gripping the arms of his chair as he fought the urge to stand and demand an explanation. He barely had time to process the thought when another detail caught his attention. As the bride shifted again to take Derek's hands, the fabric of her gown pulled slightly at her side, revealing a small scar just above her hip. Nicholas's head spun. It was faint, but he recognized it. Years ago, Sarah had been in a minor accident, nothing serious, just a fall that had left her with a small but permanent scar on her side. He had been with her when she got the stitches. He remembered how she had laughed at the irony of being a nurse while hating the sight of her own wounds. There was no mistaking it, it was her. Nicholas swallowed hard, his throat dry. But if it was Sarah, why was she here? Why was she marrying Derek under a different name? His mind reeled, struggling to make sense of it all. The Sarah he had known would never do this. She would simply leave him, only to reappear years later engaged to someone he was close to. She wouldn't unless she had been hiding something all along. The vows continued, but Nicholas barely heard them. He knew he was running out of time to decide what to do. He could feel the weight of the secret pressing down on him like a leaden blanket. If he remained silent, he would be complicit in whatever lie Sarah was living. If he spoke up, he would be exposing something that could destroy lives. The audience erupted into polite applause as the officiant pronounced Derek and Elizabeth husband and wife. Derek lifted her veil and leaned in for the ceremonial kiss. Nicholas's stomach twisted. He couldn't look away, even though every fiber of his being wanted to. As the kiss ended, the guests stood cheering and clapping, but Nicholas remained seated, feeling as though the ground beneath him had shifted irreparably. Later at the reception, Nicholas kept his distance, unwilling to approach either Derek or the bride just yet. He needed time to think, to find a way to confront her without making a scene during dinner. He sat at his assigned table, pushing food around his plate without eating. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory. Derek was all smiles, greeting guests, sharing drinks and laughter, but Nicholas's focus remained on Sarah. Now that he knew who she was, he saw it all more clearly. The tension in her shoulders, the way she forced her smiles, the way she avoided direct eye contact with him. She knew he was there, and she was terrified that he had recognized her. Nicholas's mind raced through the possibilities. Was she in danger? Had something happened that forced her to change her identity? Or was this something else entirely? He didn't have answers, but he was determined to find them. As the evening progressed, guests began taking to the dance floor, and Derek and his bride shared their first dance. Nicholas's eyes stayed locked on them, studying every move she made. She laughed at something Derek whispered in her ear, but Nicholas caught a brief flicker of unease in her expression. A woman sitting next to him nudged his arm, snapping him out of his thoughts. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said with a chuckle, sipping her champagne. He forced a tight smile and shook his head, exactly how he felt. Sarah had become a ghost in his life. One moment there, the next, gone, only to resurface in the most impossible way. His patience was wearing thin. The opportunity to speak with her alone came later that night as guests mingled and the party carried on. Sarah excused herself from Derek's side and stepped out onto the terrace for some fresh air. Nicholas took a slow breath, steadying himself. This was that he couldn't let her slip away again. With measured steps, he made his way through the crowd and followed her outside. On the terrace, his breath steady but his heart pounding, he noted the cool night air against his skin, a stark contrast to the warm reception hall behind him. He spotted her immediately. She stood near the railing, her back turned as she gazed into the dimly lit gardens below. The soft glow of hanging lanterns illuminated her silhouette, casting delicate shadows against the fabric of her wedding dress. For a moment, he hesitated. What was he supposed to say? What words could possibly encompass the years of questions, the ache of abandonment, the unbearable weight of finding her here like this? He had imagined countless scenarios in which they might meet again: an accidental encounter in a crowded city, a chance meeting in a cafe, even a carefully orchestrated conversation where she would explain everything, but never in his wildest dreams had he envisioned this. She sensed his presence before he spoke. Her shoulders tensed slightly, and though she didn't turn, he knew she was aware of him. That, more than anything, confirmed his suspicions. She knew she had seen him at the ceremony and had been avoiding him ever since. As he took a step closer, his voice was low and measured, yet filled with the weight of everything left unsaid. Elizabeth. The name felt foreign on his tongue, a poorly fitting mask she had chosen to wear. At the sound of it, she inhaled sharply, but still didn't turn to face him. Nicholas's patience was thin. The years of silence had built up too many unanswered questions, and now that she was here, standing right in front of him, he refused to let her slip away again. "Sarah," he said, his voice quieter but no less firm. A flicker of something, guilt, sorrow, regret crossed her face. She parted her lips as if to speak, but no words came. Nicholas stepped closer, watching her carefully. He didn't know what he expected: an apology, an excuse, a reason that would make sense of the years of silence, but instead, she let out a barely audible sigh and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the fight was gone. She nodded just once. Nicholas felt his stomach drop. He had known, of course, but hearing her acknowledge it made the weight of it all settle heavily inside him. "You disappeared," he stated, his voice steady yet laced with a storm of emotions. "I looked for you, Sarah." Her gaze dropped to the floor, and for a moment, she looked exactly as she had the last time he'd seen her: quiet, conflicted, on the verge of running away. "I know," she finally said, her voice softer than he remembered, almost hesitant. "I didn't want to be found." Nicholas clenched his jaw. He had spent so long convincing himself that there had to be an explanation, that something had happened beyond his control, something that had forced her away from him, but now, standing here, hearing her say those words, it felt like another blow he hadn't been prepared for. The question was barely above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of all the years between them. She hesitated for the first time, looked directly at him, and in that moment he saw everything: the sadness, the pain, the remnants of something she had tried so hard to bury. Then she spoke. "When I left, I was pregnant." Nicholas's breath caught in his throat, his mind stalled, unable to process the words immediately. She had been pregnant. The world around them seemed to slow. It was as though the ground beneath him had shifted, tilting everything he knew into unfamiliar territory. He stared at her, waiting for some clarification, for something that would make this revelation easier to grasp. She swallowed, and when she spoke again, her voice was unsteady. "I lost the baby." Nicholas exhaled a sharp, painful sound. His pulse pounded in his ears as he tried to comprehend what she was saying. She had been pregnant, and then she hadn't been. Everything clicked into place. The way she had vanished so suddenly, the way she had refused to let him find her, the way she had erased herself from his life. "You thought I wouldn't want you anymore," he said, realization dawning on him like a brutal wave. "That's why you." A single tear slipped down her cheek, and she brushed it away quickly. "You wanted a family," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You always talked about how much you wanted children, and then I lost the baby, and the doctors told me I wouldn't be able to have any more. I didn't want you to stay with me out of pity." Nicholas's chest ached as he thought back to all the nights he had spent wondering what had gone wrong, All the time he had questioned himself, convinced that he had failed her somehow, and all this time, she had been suffering alone, believing she was making the right choice by pushing him away. "You decided for me," he said, struggling to keep his voice even. She nodded, her expression filled with remorse. "I did." Silence fell between them once more, heavier this time, laden with too many things left unsaid for too long. Nicholas felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him: anger, sadness, frustration, but above all, he felt an overwhelming sense of loss. She had made her decision, and now she stood before him in a wedding dress meant for someone else. A painful realization settled in. She had built a new life, and she had done it without him. Nicholas glanced back toward the ballroom, where Derek was still mingling with guests, oblivious to the conversation unfolding just beyond his reach. His best friend, the man who had no idea that the woman he had just married wasn't who she claimed to be. Nicholas searched Sarah's face for something, anything, that would tell him what to do next. Her eyes pleaded silently, begging him not to say anything, but how could he not? The weight of the truth hung between them, and for the first time in years, Nicholas had a choice to make. He felt the cool night air pressing against his skin, yet it did little to temper the storm raging inside him. He had spent years wondering, aching, and searching for answers that had always eluded him, and now, standing here face to face with Sarah, no, not Elizabeth, he had all the answers he had once desperately sought, but instead of relief, all he felt was a deep, aching resentment. Not because she had lost our child, not because she had suffered alone, but because she had stolen his choice from him. She still gripped the terrace railing, her knuckles white, having given up on pretending. Her shoulders slumped under the weight of the truth. Nicholas could see the way she was barely holding herself together, as if afraid that one wrong word might cause everything to crumble. Derek was just inside, laughing and celebrating, completely unaware that his new wife was not who she claimed to be, that the woman he had just vowed to spend his life with was standing out here with another man, drowning in a pit of her own making. She had tried so hard to erase the past. Nicholas took a breath, struggling to contain the thousand things he wanted to say. He didn't know where to start. How could he begin to unravel years of deception, of pain, of all the things she had chosen to keep from him? Sarah was the first to break the silence. Her voice was barely audible over the distant hum of the wedding party. "I didn't expect you to be here," she admitted. Nicholas almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "Neither did I," he said, swallowing hard. "I should have told you a long time ago." The word sounded weak, insubstantial compared to the depth of what had actually happened. Nicholas had imagined so many scenarios for their reunion, but none had prepared him for this moment. "You think?" His voice was edged with bitterness, though he wasn't sure if it was directed at her or at himself for still caring after all this time. She closed her eyes for a brief moment before opening them again, her expression full of regret. "I was afraid. I thought leaving was the right thing to do," Nicholas repeated, barely able to contain his disbelief. "You thought disappearing, letting me believe I had done something to push you away, was the right thing to do?" Her gaze faltered. "I didn't want you to be stuck with me. I thought I was saving you from—" Nicholas cut her off, his voice rising slightly. "Loving you, from wanting to be with you no matter what. Because if you think I wouldn't have stayed, if you think losing our baby would have changed how I felt about you, then you never really knew me at all." Sarah flinched as if struck. "I knew you," she said softly. "That's why I left, because I knew you would stay, that you would give up everything to be with me, and I couldn't let you do that." Nicholas let out a harsh laugh, shaking his head. "So you made that decision for me. You thought you had the right to decide what I wanted." "I was trying to do the right thing," she whispered, her words twisting his heart with their logic. The notion that she had believed leaving him was a noble sacrifice rather than the cruelest act of all. You didn't do the right thing, Sarah. You ran, and now you're here, standing in front of me, pretending to be someone else married to my best friend." Tears welled in her eyes, and she quickly turned away, as if ashamed to let him see her break. But Nicholas had already seen her at her most vulnerable. He knew her better than anyone. "I never planned for this," she admitted. "When I left, I never thought I'd see you again. And then I met Derek, and it was easy simple. He didn't know about my past, he didn't ask questions. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could start over." Nicholas clenched his jaw. "Did you ever love him?" he asked. She hesitated just a second, enough, though, for him to know the truth. She cared about him. "I did," she finally said, and Nicholas understood what she was saying. She didn't love Derek, not the way she had loved him. He exhaled sharply, as the reality of the situation hit him in full force. Sarah had built a life on lies. She had rewritten her story, created a version of herself unburdened by the past, but the past had caught up with her tonight, and now he had to decide what to do about it. Inside the reception hall, laughter and music continued, oblivious to the storm unraveling just outside. Nicholas could see Derek through the large glass doors, raising a toast surrounded by friends and family, completely unaware. Sarah followed his gaze, her expression tightening. "Please," she whispered, barely audible. "Don't tell him." Nicholas felt something twist painfully inside him. The woman he had loved, the one he had spent years searching for, was now standing before him, begging him to keep her secret. He didn't know what hurt more, the fact that she had lied for so long, or that she still didn't trust him enough to believe he would do the right thing. "What do you expect me to do?" he asked, his voice raw. Sarah swallowed and stepped closer, her eyes pleading. "Please, Nicholas, just walk away. Walk away." The words echoed in his mind. It would be easy, wouldn't it? To pretend he had never come here, to pretend he hadn't seen her, to let her continue living this life she had built for herself. But that was who he was, and no matter how much it hurt, he couldn't ignore the truth. Nicholas glanced back at Derek one last time, then met Sarah's gaze with a determination she hadn't seen in years. "I can't," he said steadily. "He deserves to know." Sarah's face crumpled with emotion, but Nicholas had already made his choice. The truth was coming out, and there was no stopping it now. Nicholas turned away from the terrace, his pulse hammering as he walked back toward the reception hall. His decision had been made the moment Sarah had pleaded with him to keep her secret. He couldn't do it. He wouldn't. No matter how much he had once loved her, no matter how much seeing her again had ripped open old wounds, he couldn't let this lie stand. Derek was his best friend. He deserved the truth. Sarah didn't follow him at first. He heard her sharp intake of breath and the soft rustle of her wedding dress as she hesitated. She was ready for this confrontation, but it was no longer just about what she wanted. Nicholas stepped through the open doors of the reception hall, where the warm glow of chandeliers and the hum of laughter provided a stark contrast to the storm raging inside him. He scanned the room and quickly found Derek near the bar, raising a toast with a few of their old college friends, his face flushed with happiness, his eyes gleaming with the excitement of the evening. Derek had no idea what was about to hit him. Nicholas moved with purpose, threading his way through the tables. Every step felt heavier than the last, his chest tightened with the weight of what he was about to do. As he neared Derek, the friend caught sight of him and grinned, raising his glass in greeting. "Hey, you finally decided to join the fun," Derek called out, his voice light and filled with laughter. "For a second, I thought you'd slipped out early. You always hated these things." Nicholas's throat was dry. He forced himself to keep moving until he was just a few feet away. The noise of the room faded into the background, the world narrowing to just the two of them. Derek's smile wavered slightly. He wasn't drunk. Derek was always controlled, never wanting to lose himself in celebration, but he carried a relaxed, confident air, as if everything in his world was exactly as it should be. Nicholas's stomach twisted. That illusion was about to shatter. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice steady yet firm. Derek raised an eyebrow, glancing around at the people nearby. "Right now? Can it wait?" "We're in the middle of..." Nicholas's jaw tightened. "It can't." Derek studied him for a moment, then sighed and set his drink down, nodding toward a quieter corner near the edge of the room. "All right, what is going on?" Nicholas barely heard the music anymore as he turned to face Derek, taking a deep breath. "It's about Elizabeth," he said, watching his friend's reaction carefully. Derek frowned slightly. "What about her?" Nicholas hesitated only a moment. She is not who you think she is." Derek let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "What the hell does that mean?" Nicholas glanced towards Sarah, who had finally reached them, her expression tense and filled with regret. Derek followed his gaze, his confusion deepening. "She is not Elizabeth Hudson," Nicholas continued, forcing himself to meet Derek's eyes. "Her real name is Sarah Carter." The shift in Derek's expression was immediate. His brows furrowed as he let out a disbelieving breath, shaking his head. What are you talking about?" "Elizabeth is..." Nicholas's voice was interrupted as Sarah's quiet but firm tone entered the conversation. Derek's head snapped toward her for the first time that night, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "I don't understand," he said slowly. "You're joking, right?" "This is some kind of..." "No," Nicholas interrupted. "It's not a joke. She changed her name, changed her life. She left me years ago, disappeared, and now she is here, marrying you." Derek's expression darkened as he looked back at Sarah, searching her face for an explanation that would make sense. "Tell me this is a mistake," he said in a quieter voice, tinged with something dangerously close to desperation. Sarah swallowed hard. "I was going to tell you," she whispered, "but I didn't know how. I didn't want to lose you." Derek took a step back, as if suddenly unsure of the ground beneath him. Nicholas watched his best friend closely, seeing the slow unraveling of trust play out across his face. He hated that it had come to this, but there had never been another option. Derek's jaw clenched. "So you rewrote yourself to erase your past as if it never happened?" Sarah blinked back tears. "I didn't want to erase it. I just wanted to start over." Derek exhaled sharply, rubbing his hand over his face. "And you thought lying to me was the way to do that?" Nicholas stood silent as the moment unfolded. This was between Sarah and Derek. Now the truth was out, and there was no undoing it. Derek turned to Nicholas, his eyes searching for an explanation, a reason, maybe even betrayal. "How long have you known?" he asked. Nicholas didn't hesitate. "I recognized her at the ceremony." Derek let out a bitter laugh. "Of course you did, and you waited until now to tell me?" "I needed to hear the truth from her first," Nicholas admitted quietly. Derek nodded slowly, as if piecing together the final fragments of a puzzle he had dreaded. "So what now?" he asked hollowly. "Am I supposed to just pretend this never happened, to act as if everything is fine?" Sarah shook her head, stepping forward. "Derek, please, this doesn't change how I feel about you." Derek studied her carefully, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he shook his head. "No," he said heavily. "It changes everything." Silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of realization. Derek looked at Nicholas, then his eyes tiredly met his. You did the right thing, he said quietly. Nicholas nodded. He didn't feel victorious, only the dull ache of knowing that no matter how this night ended, none of them would walk away unscathed. Derek took a slow breath and then turned back to Sarah. I need some time, he admitted. I can't be in that room right now. Nicholas didn't stop him when Derek turned and walked away. He stood in the quiet, watching as his best friend disappeared down the hall, leaving behind a wedding that no longer existed. Nicholas lingered in the dimly lit hallway long after Derek had left. The quiet settled over him like a weight on his chest as he tried to process everything that had just happened. The night had unraveled in ways he never could have predicted, turning what was meant to be a joyous occasion into something fractured, raw, and irreversibly changed. Through the glass doors of the ballroom, he saw guests still celebrating, laughing, and drinking, unaware of the wreckage left behind. Perhaps some had noticed Derek's absence or the way the bride had slipped away, but no one seemed overly concerned. The show was still going on, even as the main players had begun to walk away. Then his eyes found her. Sarah stood just inside near the entrance to the ballroom, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She wasn't crying, but she looked as if she might break apart at any moment. She had always been good at holding things together, at pretending she was fine, but Nicholas knew her well. She was unraveling. She lifted her gaze and found him standing outside the doors for a long moment. Neither of them moved. There was nothing left to hide, no more pretense. Nicholas exhaled, then pushed open the door and stepped inside. Sarah straightened as she approached but said nothing first. Instead, she watched him with guarded eyes. He stopped in front of her, his pulse now steady, no longer driven by anger or resentment. There was only the quiet understanding that they had reached a crossroads, and whatever happened next would define the rest of their lives. Derek left, Nicholas said finally. Sarah? She swallowed, nodding. I figured he would need time. I know, came her quiet reply. A silence stretched between them, the background music feeling distant, as if belonging to another world entirely. Nicholas studied her, noting the exhaustion on her face and the slight tremor in her clasped hands. I didn't want it to end like this, she whispered. I didn't want to hurt him. Nicholas believed her. Whatever else had happened, whatever choices she had made, he knew she had never meant to destroy Derek. She had wanted a new life, a fresh start. She had wanted to escape her past, but in the end, the past had found her anyway. You lied to him, Nicholas said, not unkindly, just stating the truth. Sarah flinched slightly, but did not look away. I did, she admitted, a bitter smile touching her lips. Yeah, Nicholas hesitated. There was still so much between them, so much unresolved, but the storm raging in his chest had quieted. He had spent so long being angry at her for leaving, angry at himself for never understanding, angry at the universe for taking away something that once felt so certain, but now, standing here, he realized something. The anger was gone. All that was left was the question of what came next. Why did you say yes? He asked. Derek, why did you agree to marry him? Sarah let out a slow breath, her shoulders dropping slightly. Because it was easy, she admitted. He was safe. He didn't know my past, he didn't ask questions. I thought if I could just start over with him, if I could be someone else, I wouldn't have to carry all of this anymore. She gestured vaguely, as if trying to encompass the past, the pain, the loss, but it didn't work. Nicholas, he said, you asked me to walk away. Sarah nodded slowly, her expression cautious. I don't think I can. Her breath hitched, but she didn't move. Instead, she held his gaze, searching his face for any hesitation or doubt. Because, Nicholas said softly, for the first time in years, I know exactly what I want. I never stopped loving you. Sarah's eyes widened in surprise as she saw the battle within her, the fear and hope warring side by side. "You left me once," he continued, "and I want to let you do it again." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "Nicholas, if you don't love me, if you don't want this, tell me now. I'll leave. I'll let you go." She shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I never stopped loving you either," she whispered. Nicholas exhaled, his chest tightening. He had braced himself for rejection, for the possibility that too much had happened, that too much had changed, but hearing her say it, seeing the raw honesty in her eyes, made everything else fade away. "Then don't run," he said firmly. "Not this time." Sarah let out a shaky laugh, brushing away a tear. "Where would I even go?" she managed, a slight smile forming. "Anywhere, but this time, I'll go with you." Her laughter turned into a quiet sob, and before he could think, she stepped forward, wrapping her arms around him. Nicholas held her tightly, burying his face in her hair and breathing her in. It felt like coming home after years of wandering. Outside, the world continued. Guests danced, music played, the wedding celebration carried on, but in that moment, nothing else mattered. This was their second chance, and neither of them was letting go. Nicholas held Sarah in his arms, as the weight of the past dissolved in the warmth of her embrace. The years of separation, the unanswered questions, the resentment, and heartbreak all faded into insignificance. It no longer mattered why she had left, or what had kept them apart. What mattered was that she was there, in his arms, and she wasn't running anymore. The music in the reception hall played on, and around them, people continued celebrating, unaware of the profound shift that had taken place. Nicholas could feel Sarah's steady breath against his chest, as if she too had finally let go of the tension that had held her captive for so long. She pulled back slightly, looking up at him with eyes still shimmering with emotion. "What now?" she asked softly. Nicholas brushed his thumb across her cheek and said, "We figure it out." His voice was gentle, answering the unspoken question between them. Sarah let out a soft, relieved laugh and shook her head. "I don't even know where to start." Nicholas smiled and said, "We start here right now." Glancing around the room, his expression turned serious again. "Derek needs time. I don't know if he'll ever forgive you or me, or if he should, but that's his decision now." Sarah swallowed hard. "I never wanted to hurt him," she murmured. "I know," Nicholas replied, "and I understand. Whatever mistakes you made, whatever choices led us here, I know you never meant for any of this to happen." He glanced toward the far side of the room, where Derek had disappeared earlier. "But I have to make my choice," he said quietly. "And I know Derek must make his own." Sarah took a deep breath, her hand tightening around his. "What if this doesn't work?" she asked hesitantly. Nicholas met her steady gaze. "Then we try again and again until we get it right." A slow smile formed on her lips, the first real smile he had seen from her all night. The weight of everything was still there, but it no longer felt insurmountable. Nicholas turned slightly, scanning the room. With quiet certainty, he took her hand and led her toward the center of the dance floor. As they moved, guests parted, some watching in confusion, others in curiosity, perhaps assuming it was just part of the night's chaos or simply seeing two people who belonged together. Sarah rested her head against his chest, and Nicholas closed his eyes for a brief moment, allowing himself to feel the music, the warmth of her embrace, and the quiet understanding that after everything, they had found their way back to each other. When the song ended, a round of applause broke out from some of the guests, who likely had no idea what they were witnessing. Sarah looked up at him, a mixture of awe and disbelief in her eyes. "We really just did that," she murmured. Nicholas chuckled softly. Yeah, we did. She bit her lip and glanced around. People are going to have questions, she said. Nicholas smirked. Let them ask. Sarah laughed and shook her head. You're impossible, she teased. Nicholas leaned in slightly, his lips brushing her forehead. But you love me anyway, right? She sighed dramatically. Yeah, I guess I do. The warmth in his chest spread as the pain and loss of the past faded into insignificance. In that moment, they had a second chance, and they weren't going to waste it. As the night carried on, Nicholas felt lighter than he had in years. The burden of the past was still there, but no longer suffocating. For the first time in a long time, he could envision a future not just for himself, but for the two of them, and he was going to let go. When the last song of the night played and the remaining guests began to drift away, Nicholas took Sarah's hand once more and led her toward the exit. The uncertain world outside beckoned, full of challenges, but they would face it together, and that was all that mattered. A decade had passed since that fateful night at the Chicago wedding, a night that unraveled secrets, shattered old illusions, and ultimately sowed the seeds for redemption and healing. Over the years, the lives of Nicholas Turner, Sarah Carter, and Derek Morgan had taken unexpected turns, and each had been forced to confront the ghosts of their past. In the quiet moments before dawn, when the world is bathed in the soft light of possibility, the true measure of love is revealed not through perfection, but through the willingness to change, forgive, and grow. On a brisk autumn morning in downtown Chicago, the city awoke to a sense of renewal. Nicholas Turner, now in his early 50s, had transformed not only as a man, but also as a leader in his field. Once a brilliant yet emotionally guarded fertility specialist, Nicholas had learned to balance his relentless pursuit of scientific excellence with the tenderness that comes from embracing vulnerability. Now, as the director of a pioneering reproductive medicine center, he had expanded his vision to include holistic patient care, integrating mental and emotional support into the clinical process. His reputation had grown beyond the confines of the hospital. He was a mentor to young doctors, a speaker at international conferences, and an advocate for compassionate medicine. Yet, behind the accolades and the polished public image, Nicholas carried memories of that tumultuous past. The nights of solitude, the countless unanswered questions about Sarah's disappearance, and the painful truth he had unearthed at Derek's wedding still lingered in his heart. In his quiet office overlooking Lake Michigan, framed photographs of colleagues, family gatherings, and candid snapshots of his patients' smiles decorated the walls, a testament to the life he had built. But one photograph, slightly faded and set apart, captured a moment of tenderness between him and Sarah, a moment when their eyes had met without the weight of unspoken secrets. That picture, tucked away in a leather-bound journal, reminded him daily of how far they had come. Sarah Carter, once known as Sarah, a woman haunted by a past of regret and unspoken apologies, had undergone a transformation that no one could have foreseen. After that tumultuous night on the terrace and the confession that had shattered the lives of those who loved her, Sarah had embarked on a solitary journey toward redemption. At first, she had retreated from the world, isolating herself in the quiet suburbs of Ohio, where she spent months in therapy, piecing together the fragments of her identity. She had immersed herself in volunteer work, joining organizations that helped women facing reproductive challenges and domestic hardships. Over time, the deep wounds that had driven her to reinvent herself began to heal, replaced by a sincere desire to help others rediscover their own strength. Now in her early 50s as well, Sarah had reinvented herself once more. She had become a counselor and advocate for women struggling with the emotional fallout of loss and betrayal. Her gentle demeanor belied an inner resilience, a determination to make amends, and to show that love, even when marred by mistakes, could be a transformative force. Sarah's journey had also led her back to her artistic side. She had begun writing poetry and short stories, using her words as a conduit for expressing the complex emotions that she had once locked away. Each verse was a quiet testament to the power of forgiveness and the liberating strength of truth. Derek Morgan, once the epitome of success and unwavering control, had not remained untouched by the chaos that had unfolded that fateful night. In the years following the revelation about Sarah's past, Derek had retreated into himself, grappling with betrayal, anger, and the painful realization that the woman he thought he had married was not the one she had presented to him. The shock had rattled him to his core, prompting him to question not only the foundation of his relationship, but also the very nature of trust. In the wake of those events, Derek had chosen to embrace change rather than wallow in regret. The corporate lawyer, who had once prided himself on his imperturbable demeanor, found solace in exploring the depths of his emotions. He sought therapy, began practicing meditation, and gradually discovered that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness, but rather a gateway to deeper, more authentic connections. As Derek's personal life evolved, he also reinvented his professional identity. He became involved in pro bono work, assisting those who had been wronged by corporate malpractice. His reputation as a sharp legal mind was now accompanied by a compassionate heart, a rare combination that earned him respect both in and out of the courtroom. It was on a chilly November evening that fate conspired to bring the three lives together once again. The occasion was unexpected, an annual charity gala hosted by the Reproductive Medicine Center that Nicholas had helped build. The gala was a celebration of hope and new beginnings, dedicated to raising funds for couples struggling with infertility and women recovering from personal tragedies. Invitations had been sent far and wide, and among the guests were old friends, patients, and even a few strangers whose lives had been touched by the center's work. As Nicholas arrived at the elegant venue, a refurbished historical mansion in the heart of the city, he was struck by a feeling of déjà vu. The ballroom, adorned with shimmering chandeliers and soft, ambient lighting, evoked memories of a past filled with both joy and sorrow. Yet, tonight was different. Tonight, the air was filled with an unspoken promise of healing and reconciliation. Nicholas took a moment to center himself before stepping into the throng of well-dressed guests. His eyes wandered across the room until they met those of a familiar face. There, near the reception table, stood Sarah, no longer the woman shrouded in mystery and pain, but someone whose presence exuded quiet strength and grace. Her eyes, warm and inviting, met his, and for a long moment, time seemed to pause. Sarah had chosen a modest navy dress for the evening, her hair softly pulled back to reveal delicate silver strands that spoke of wisdom and experience. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the haunted look of a woman who had fled from her past. In her place was someone who had embraced every hardship as a stepping stone toward a brighter future. As she moved gracefully through the crowd, greeting old acquaintances and sharing genuine smiles, it was evident that she had found her own form of peace. Not far away, Derek stood with a quiet dignity, his eyes reflecting a mixture of introspection and newfound hope. Though the scars of betrayal had not entirely faded, he had learned to accept them as part of his journey. Tonight, he was not alone. Friends and colleagues surrounded him, their laughter a gentle reminder that life was too short to be defined by past mistakes. Derek's transformation was subtle yet profound. He had traded in the rigid armor of his youth for a more fluid, compassionate outlook on life. The charity gala unfolded with a gentle rhythm, punctuated by soft jazz music, heartfelt speeches, and the clinking of champagne glasses. As the evening progressed, a series of unexpected events brought the trio together in moments that would forever alter the course of their lives. During a quiet interlude between speeches, Nicholas found himself stepping out onto a small veranda attached to the mansion. The cool night air and the gentle rustle of leaves provided a serene backdrop for reflection. It was there that he unexpectedly encountered Sarah. For a few moments, they simply stood in silence, the weight of shared memories and unspoken apologies hanging between them like fragile glass ornaments. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice soft and tentative. "Nicholas," she began, "I know it's been a long time, and there is so much we left unsaid. But tonight, I feel like maybe we have a chance to start over. No pretenses, no regrets. Just truth." Nicholas's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he replied, "Sarah, I've carried the burden of our past for so long, trying to make sense of it all. But tonight, looking at you, I see the woman who dared to reinvent herself, who found strength in her vulnerability. I want to believe that love can heal us, that forgiveness is possible." Their conversation deepened as the night wore on, and as they spoke about the years that had passed of struggles, of small victories, of moments when life had both tested and rewarded them, they discovered that beneath the layers of pain lay a profound connection that had never truly faded. It was as if the universe had conspired to reunite them at the precise moment when both were ready to face their past and embrace a future of mutual understanding. Meanwhile, Derek, who had been lingering near the grand piano in the corner of the ballroom, listened intently as one of the keynote speakers recounted a story of loss and renewal. The words resonated with him, stirring up emotions he had long kept buried. In a moment of quiet reflection, he realized that the path to healing was not one that could be walked alone. With renewed determination, Derek decided that it was time to reach out, not only to mend his own heart, but to extend the hand of reconciliation to those he cared about. In the weeks following the gala, the three of them began to navigate the delicate terrain of reconciliation. Nicholas and Sarah started meeting regularly, not with the fervor of youthful passion, but with the steady, measured pace of souls who had been tempered by life as challenges. Their conversations were candid and raw, touching on topics that had once been taboo: their regrets, their hopes, the ways in which their lives had changed. Together, they explored the possibility of a renewed relationship founded on honesty and mutual respect. One crisp Saturday morning, Nicholas invited Sarah to join him at a local park for a leisurely stroll. The park was alive with the vibrant colors of fall, the trees ablaze with reds, oranges, and gold, a metaphor, perhaps, for the beauty that emerges when old leaves are shed. As they walked side by side along a winding path, they talked about everything from their favorite books to the subtle shifts in their beliefs about love and commitment. Nicholas confessed, "I used to think that my work was the only thing that mattered, that emotions were a luxury I couldn't afford. But meeting you again, seeing how you've turned your pain into art and compassion, has taught me that the heart is capable of so much more." Sarah smiled, her eyes reflecting both sadness and hope. "I used to run away from my mistakes, thinking that by hiding, I could avoid the pain of accountability. But I've come to learn that facing my past head-on, however painful it may be, is the only way to truly move forward. I'm not perfect, Nicholas. I never will be. But I'm willing to try if you are." Their shared vulnerability laid the groundwork for something deeper, a love that was not built on the fragile illusions of youth, but on the solid foundation of lived experience and hard-won wisdom. They began to collaborate on projects that blended their professional expertise with their personal journeys. Nicholas introduced innovative programs at his center that addressed not only the physical aspects of fertility, but also the emotional well-being of his patients. Sarah, with her newfound passion for counseling and writing, led support groups and workshops that helped women navigate the complexities of loss and renewal. While Nicholas and Sarah worked on rekindling their connection, Derek was embarking on a journey of his own. His legal career had taken an unexpected turn as he became a fierce advocate for justice, particularly in cases where corporate greed had exploited the vulnerable. Yet, beneath the public persona of the determined lawyer, Derek was struggling with the inner demons of betrayal and regret. One rainy evening, as he sat alone in his office overlooking the city skyline, he penned a letter, a cathartic outpouring of his thoughts and feelings. In that letter, Derek wrote not only about the pain of the past, but also about his hope for forgiveness, both for himself and for those he had wronged. Months later, Derek found himself volunteering at a community center dedicated to helping individuals rebuild their lives after financial or personal hardship. There, he met a diverse group of people, each with their own story of loss and recovery. Among them was a woman named Olivia Reyes, whose warmth and resilience struck a chord deep within him. Olivia, a former small business owner who had lost everything in an economic downturn, possessed an unwavering spirit. Her courage in the face of adversity reminded Derek of the importance of empathy, and slowly he began to open up about his own struggles. In quiet conversations over coffee and shared moments of laughter, Derek discovered that love often blooms in the most unexpected places. Olivia, too, carried scars from a past marred by disappointment and broken trust. As their friendship deepened, she and Derek found solace in each other's company. They began to see that the process of healing was not linear, but rather a tapestry woven from moments of vulnerability, forgiveness, and the willingness to start over. In time, Derek realized that his transformation was far from complete. The lessons of the past continued to guide him toward a future that was not defined by bitterness, but by the promise of second chances. As the seasons changed and the years continued their steady march forward, the lives of Nicholas, Sarah, and Derek began to intertwine in ways that none of them had anticipated. A series of chance encounters, thoughtful gestures, and shared endeavors wove a tapestry of connection that transcended past grievances and celebrated the triumph of the human spirit. One spring afternoon, as Nicholas was hosting a symposium at his center on the integration of emotional wellness in reproductive medicine, he received an unexpected call from Derek. The conversation was brief but laden with significance. Derek had secured a major case that would not only bring justice to a community in need, but also pave the way for more compassionate legal reforms. Overwhelmed by the news, Derek invited Nicholas to join him for dinner that evening. At the restaurant, the old friends reconnected over memories of their college days and the twists and turns that had led them to this moment. They discussed the challenges they had faced, the regrets that had once threatened to consume them, and the surprising ways in which love had ultimately guided them toward healing. Later that evening, Sarah received a text message from Nicholas inviting her to a small gathering at his center as celebration of the successful integration of new support programs and a tribute to the resilience of the human heart. With a mixture of trepidation and hope, she agreed to attend. When she arrived, she was greeted not only by familiar faces but also by Derek, who extended a tentative smile of recognition. In that moment, the weight of the past seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of unity and shared purpose. The gathering became a turning point, a celebration of not just professional achievements, but of personal triumphs. There were heartfelt speeches, laughter that echoed through the hall, and quiet moments of introspection, as each person acknowledged the challenges they had overcome. It was a testament to the transformative power of love and the enduring capacity of the human heart to forgive and renew itself. In the years that followed, Nicholas and Sarah continued to nurture their rekindled relationship, slowly building a partnership rooted in trust, honesty, and mutual respect. They learned that love was not about erasing the past, but about embracing every part of their journey, both the light and the shadows. Together, They traveled, explored new hobbies, and even collaborated on a book detailing their shared experiences, a narrative that wove together the threads of loss, redemption, and the infinite possibilities of second chances. Their work together extended beyond the personal realm. At the Reproductive Medicine Center, Nicholas implemented innovative programs that addressed the emotional needs of patients, inspired in large part by the lessons he had learned through his own turbulent history. Sarah's workshops and counseling sessions began to attract women from across the country, each seeking solace and guidance in the midst of their own struggles. The center became a beacon of hope, a place where science and compassion met, and where the message was clear: love, in all its complexity, was the most potent medicine of all. For Derek, life with Olivia took on a quiet beauty of its own. The legal battles he once fought with a hardened heart were now waged with empathy and a deep-seated commitment to justice. With Olivia by his side, he found that even the most painful experiences could be transformed into opportunities for growth and change. Their partnership, though not without its own challenges, blossomed into a source of strength and inspiration for those around them. Together, they organized community outreach programs, mentoring young professionals, and advocating for policy changes that would protect the vulnerable. In the process, Derek learned that true love was not just about romantic gestures, but about standing up for what was right even when it meant facing uncomfortable truths. On the 10th anniversary of the charity gala that had rekindled their lives, Nicholas organized a grand celebration at the center, a reunion of hearts, and a tribute to the resilience of the human spirit. The event was held in a sprawling, newly renovated auditorium adorned with fresh blooms and soft lighting that evoked a sense of rebirth. Invitations had been extended to everyone who had played a part in the journey, from patients whose lives had been transformed by the center's programs to colleagues, mentors, and friends who had shared in the triumphs and trials of the past decade. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation as guests took their seats. The stage was set for an evening of heartfelt speeches, musical performances, and the sharing of personal stories. Among the attendees were Nicholas, Sarah, and Derek, each a living testament to the transformative power of forgiveness and love. As the evening unfolded, the three friends took turns addressing the crowd. Nicholas spoke first, his voice resonant with warmth and gratitude. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate not just our achievements in medicine, but the incredible journey of human resilience. Every obstacle we have faced, every heartache we have endured, has led us to this moment, a moment of hope, of love, and of new beginnings." Sarah followed, her eyes shining with sincerity. "I once believed that the weight of my past would forever keep me captive in a cycle of regret and sorrow. But I have learned that every scar tells a story of survival, of growth, and ultimately of love. I stand before you as proof that even in our darkest moments, there is a light that can guide us home." Finally, Derek took the stage, his tone measured and reflective. "There was a time when I thought that trust was a luxury I could no longer afford, when the pain of betrayal seemed too great to bear. But love has a way of softening even the hardest of hearts. I have learned that forgiveness is not an act of weakness, but a strength that binds us together in our shared humanity." The audience erupted in applause, each word resonating deeply with those who had gathered. That night, beneath a starlit sky, old wounds began to mend, and new bonds were formed, a tapestry of human connection that defied the passage of time. Epilogue: the endless journey. 10 years had transformed lives in ways that none could have predicted. Nicholas, Sarah, and Derek had each faced their own battles, learned from their missteps, and discovered that the true essence of love was not found in perfection, but in the courage to face one's vulnerabilities and to embrace change. Their journeys were intertwined by the common threads of forgiveness, resilience, and the unwavering belief that every ending is simply the beginning of a new chapter. As the celebration drew to a close, Nicholas and Sarah walked together through the quiet corridors of the center, their hands intertwined and their hearts aligned. In a small garden tucked away behind the building, where the fragrance of blooming roses mingled with the soft whispers of the wind, they paused to reflect on the road they had traveled. The challenges of the past, once insurmountable, now felt like distant memories, a testament to the transformative power of love and the beauty of second chances. In that tranquil moment, as the night embraced them in its gentle darkness, they understood that the journey of healing and growth was endless. It was a journey marked not by the absence of pain, but by the courage to love despite it, to forgive even when it seemed impossible, and to build a future on the foundation of hope and resilience. The message they carried was simple yet profound. Love, in its purest form, is a force that transcends time, healing wounds, uniting hearts, and inspiring us to become the best versions of ourselves. No matter how many obstacles life may present, the light of love continues to shine, guiding us forward on a path of endless possibility. And so, as the new day dawned over Chicago, casting a soft glow over the city that had witnessed their transformation, Nicholas, Sarah, and Derek, each in their own way, stepped boldly into the future. They knew that the road ahead might still be fraught with challenges, that the scars of the past might sometimes ache, but they also understood that the power of love was greater than any hardship. In their hearts, they carried the promise of new beginnings, a promise that no matter how dark the night, the sun would rise again, bringing with it the hope of a better tomorrow. In that promise lay the true beauty of their journey, a journey of forgiveness, transformation, and an unyielding belief in the redemptive power of love. And as they embraced the uncertainties of the future, they did so with a quiet confidence that, together, they could overcome anything. Their story was not one of flawless perfection, but of real people learning to love unconditionally, forging connections that could weather even the strongest storms, and celebrating the miraculous resilience of the human spirit. For love, as they had discovered, was not a destination but an endless journey, a journey that, with every step, brought them closer to the truth that in the tapestry of life, every thread, every scar, and every moment of vulnerability was woven together to create a masterpiece of redemption and hope. The end of one chapter, the beginning of another. As the evening's lights dimmed and the guests slowly departed, the three friends remained together under the vast, starry sky. In that quiet, sacred moment, they made a silent pact, a promise to always cherish the love they had found, to never let fear or regret keep them from the life they were meant to live, and to carry the message of hope forward to every soul they encountered. Nicholas looked at Sarah and then at Derek, and with a gentle smile said, "We have come so far, and yet our journey is only just beginning." Sarah squeezed his hand in affirmation, her eyes reflecting a deep understanding, while Derek nodded, his expression one of resolute optimism. Together, they stepped forward into the night, ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold, united by a love that had been tested by time and tempered by truth. And so, under the endless expanse of the universe, the promise of tomorrow shone brighter than ever, a promise that no matter how winding the road or how steep the climb, love would always be the guiding light that illuminated their way forward. In the heart of Chicago, where once secrets had torn lives apart, a new era of forgiveness, compassion, and boundless love had dawned. And as each of them embraced the next chapter of their lives, they carried with them the unwavering conviction that love, in all its messy, imperfect glory, was the one thing that could truly save them, and in that truth lay the promise of eternal renewal. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. Watch more videos next, and share this one with others.